What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. And in this video I will be going over every single AFL team's most underrated player for the season. Some of these players who I will mention are actually kind of well known. They just don't get as much spotlight as they do, especially compared to their teammates. So let's just get straight into the video. I'm going to go in alphabetical order, and for Adelaide, I reckon the most underrated player is Luke Brown. And I'm probably saying this to the fact that most of you guys probably don't even know who he is, or probably don't know too much about him. So he's played 150 games for the Crows, and as I said before, you probably don't even know much about him. He's ranked 5th for rebounds last year for the Crows and averaged 15.2 disposals, and is usually a lock-in defender. Played around 17 games last year, so yeah, he's definitely an underrated player for the Crows. So for the Lions, I'll go with Jarryd Lyons. So yeah, most of you guys probably do already know who he is. He's had a very massive season in 2019 with the Lions. He used to play for the Suns, and to be honest with you, I barely knew who he was, especially while he was at the Suns. But he was consistently getting around 20 touches. But now at the Lions, he's averaging almost 24 touches. He's second for tackles at 143, which is almost top 10 in the league. And he's played every single game this season at the Lions. So yeah, he's definitely going to be a lock-in player next year. But I reckon he doesn't get given as much credit as he deserves because the likes of Lachie Neale, Dane Zorko usually take the spotlight. The next year, I reckon he'll back up his performances and might even be contention for Brownlow medal. Well, who knows? Definitely could win Brisbane's best and fairest next year. For the Blues, we've got Nick Newman, and yeah, he was a new pickup for the Blues in 2019, and most people didn't really see him as much of a value, just saw him as maybe a fill-in player who could play 10 or 15 games. He's cemented his spot in the side, playing 20 of the 22 games for the Blues whilst averaging 21 possessions. So yeah, he was a new pickup from the Swans, and as well as that, he's one of the top ranked players for meters gained running off halfback. So he's one of the top players for meters gained in the league, and most people didn't see him as much of a player. He's a 26-year-old, yet he hasn't even played 50 games yet. So he's definitely a player to watch next year for the Blues, and as most people probably wouldn't even see him as a top 10 contender for the Blues, let alone in the top 22. For the Pies, we have Tom Phillips, who is a very underrated winger. Played every single game in the Collingwood season, averaging 23.8 touches, including a 34 disposal and 2-goal game against the Blues, which was, he's probably his best game for the season. He's around 24 years old. He's played 75 odd games. So yeah, definitely look out for the Pies. They don't talk about him, Tom Phillips. They talk more about, you got Treloar, you got Grundy, you got De Goey, you got Sidebottom. But yeah, Tom Phillips always flies under the radar, so he's definitely one player to watch and is definitely underrated for the Pies. For the Bombers, Mason Redman. For a lot of people, he may be seen as a nobody. He played his first game in 2016 and only played 5 games as of 2018. But in 2019, he cemented a spot in the side, playing 20 of the 23 games, averaging 17 disposals, and being 5th for rebounds for the Bombers. He's definitely going to be a star player in the future if he continues what he did for the last season. Mason Redman might not be much of a player at the moment and might not have made a name of himself yet, but he's definitely a player to keep an eye out and probably doesn't get enough credit as he should for the season he has this year, since, to be fair, I barely knew about him just up until now. For the Dockers, we have Luke Ryan, who is definitely an up-and-coming star defender. Doesn't get enough recognition for the stuff that he does. It is only his 3rd season, so he is definitely a new player. But he averages 20.5 touches as a defender, which is just elite. He averages 2nd for rebounds for the Dockers, as well as 3rd for 1%ers. So not only does he get the ball, but he also does a team thing and affects the play. Not only has he had a breakout season in 2019, but in 2018 his stats were just as consistent, where he basically averaged 20 touches as well. And I watched him play against the Saints in round 3 earlier this year, and he was one of the reasons why we lost. He would just get the ball all the time, take marks, rebound it off half back. He's a very good player. And I'm not too sure about his hairstyle, but he's definitely a good player, and he's just not talked about enough when you're discussing Freo stars. For Geelong, we've got Mitch Duncan, who is a player that most of you guys should know. He's played over 200 games for the Cats, but he still doesn't get enough recognition for the stuff that he does. When you think about the Cats midfield, you think of Dangerfield, Selwood, and Ablett. Mitch Duncan, he still averages 25.3 disposals per game, which is more than Ablett and Selwood this season. He's never won an All-Australian, which all the other players who I have mentioned have. And as well as that, he's kicked 20 goals this season from his 24 games, meaning that not only is he good at finding the ball, but he's also elite at getting goals, especially as a midfielder. And if that's not enough, Mitch Duncan ranks 5th in marks in the whole AFL with 172, which is basically an average of around 8 per game. For Gold Coast, Darcy McPherson. I could have basically done any Gold Coast player because, to be fair, no one's heard of them. But Darcy McPherson stood out for me for underrated plays. He played all games this season for the Suns, which is, considering from his previous years, he barely played any, wasn't really able to get a spot in the team. But now he's averaging 18.7 touches. He's got the Suns' most tackles for the Suns. He's got the most goal assists for the Suns. And yeah, he's now finally starting to play games. Yeah, for most people, he's probably a nobody because I'm sure if I went up to 100 random AFL fans, not more than 50% will know who Darcy McPherson is, but he's definitely a player to watch out next year for the Suns. For GWS, Brent Daniels. So he might be basically just about the same height as me, but he's definitely a player to look out for. He was only one of 4 Giants players to play all games in 2019, and he's been his second season, so most people don't really know too much about him. The only thing they'd probably know about is him kicking the winning goal against Brisbane in the semi-final, but he's definitely a shining talent. He's ranked 2nd in the league for goal assists, and he averages 15 touches a game. And yeah, I could have picked up a lot of other Giants players as underrated, such as Jacob Hopper, Harry Himmelberg, or even Matt DeBoer, but I went with Brent Daniels because most people probably don't know too much about him, and yeah, he's definitely a good player. For Hawthorn, Blake Hardwick. He has not missed a game since round 4, 2017. Which just proves how consistent he is. And if he can get a spot for every game since 2017, it must mean he's pretty decent to get a spot on the Hawks list. He's only played 65 games, but he's only 22 years old, so he's definitely got a lot more years left in him. He averages 17 touches and is 3rd for 1%ers in the Hawks lineup. He's overshadowed by a lot of Hawthorn's bigger stars like Tom Mitchell, James Worpel, and Jager O'Meara. Melbourne, James Harm. He's definitely an underrated midfielder for the D's. When you think of midfielders, you don't really think of James Harm's 4 plays, and he was ranked 2nd this year for the disposals for the Melbourne Demons at 24.5, which is more than Angus Brayshaw, Jack Viney, and Nathan Jones. And let's face it, he probably doesn't get the spotlight as much as those 3 players have. Yes, the D's played appalling in 2019, but not only that, last year he also averaged around 24 possessions in a great side where all the likes of the good players stepped up as well. So he's just been consistent for the past couple years. And yeah, he just falls under the radar, which is a prime example. I made a video where I had to guess the top 100 or 50 players in the league, and the one I forgot was James Harms. So that just shows how much he's underrated, because a lot of people probably miss him when they are discussing Melbourne's best players. North Melbourne, Jamie McMillan. This was a bit of a tough one since there are actually many other North players who do fall a bit under the radar. North do have a lot of players who just don't get acknowledged as much as they probably should have, but I went with Jamie McMillan because in the 18 games that he's played as a defender, he's averaged 20 touches, which is pretty good as a defender, especially as a tall defender like him. He's tied with Robbie Tarrant, who's also another player who I believe is very underrated. And yeah, he definitely does All-Australia. Tied in rebounds with 98. And many forget that Jamie McMillan has over 150 games experience with the Roos and has played games since 2010. So he's almost becoming a veteran of the club. And a lot of people don't really, they kind of forget about him. Like, I'm sure most people do know who he is, but they just don't really talk about him that much when talking about the Roos. Port Adelaide, Dan Houston. So Dan Houston he's averaged 21.5 touches as a defender in 2019. Like I said with Jamie McMillan, it's pretty good, averaging over 20 touches as a defender. Played 60 games in 3 seasons of footy, which people tend to forget that. He's a very young player, but he plays like a 150 gamer. That is how good he is. He's definitely overshadowed by the likes of other Port players. But yeah, Dan Houston is very underrated. For Richmond, Kane Lambert. Kane Lambert is definitely a seriously underrated player in my opinion, as definitely hard to get credit and acknowledgement in a very strong Richmond team where basically every player plays to their strengths and they all have a part in the team. But yeah, Dustin Martin, Tom Lynch, Jack Grewal, Trent Cotchin, Alex Ranson, Dylan Grimes, just to name a few, always usually steal the spotlight. But Kane Lambert, you wouldn't have thought, but he's 28 years old, so he's a mature player. He hasn't even played 100 games yet. He's averaged 22 touches as a half forward, which is just extremely good, and he's a two-time premiership player, so definitely something to look at as well. St Kilda, Callum Wilkie. So as a St Kilda fan, I could have gone with the likes of Rowan Marshall or Hunter Clark, who just had amazing seasons in 2019. But Callum Wilkie's a player who is a bit overlooked. Most people wouldn't have heard of him. He's played his first season in 2019, so he's only played one season. But in that season, he's averaged 15 disposals, second for 1%ers in the team, third for contested marks, and second for rebounds, and is now cemented a spot as a defender for St Kilda. He would take the best small forward in the game pretty much, and he would lock him down. He's an awesome player. And yeah, just if you do not know who he is, definitely keep an eye out for Callum Wilkie next year, because he's definitely going to get a whole lot more games. For Sydney Swans, George Hewitt. It was a tough one to choose. I had a few other options like Ollie Florent. But yeah, George Hewitt is a very underrated midfielder who averages 22 touches, 11 of them contested, and he's a pretty good ball user for the Swans. Often very much underlooked, but he just gets the job done. And he had another great season in 2019. And yeah, he's soon to play 100 games, so he's starting to get a bit of experience on the belt. But yeah, he's definitely one of the Swans' better players, and yeah, very underrated. West Coast Eagles, Brad Shepherd. Brad Shepherd has played every single game for the Eagles in 2019, which is a pretty good effort considering how strong the Eagles lineup is. He's averaged 20 disposals and he's just been consistent. He was unfortunate to miss out on the 2018 premiership due to an injury, but is an elite ball user and is usually in the shadow of other defenders such as Yeo, Hearn and McGovern. Many wouldn't have thought that he's actually played a fair amount of games, 178 games. He started in 2010, but honestly, I thought he was a 100 game player. So he's definitely got more experience than many people think. And as well as that, he's ranked first in the league for marks with 188, which is a pretty good effort, meaning that he's able to take the intercept mark and play on. And he's second for the Eagles in rebounds as well. So he's definitely a dangerous, penetrating player who's very much overlooked. For the Western Bulldogs, I went with a first-year player, Bailey Smith. He's averaged 17.7 touches in his first season. He's played every single game, all 23. He was ranked 7th in the national draft in 2018. And yeah, he's gotten rewarded for his effort, ranking 4th in the Rising Star. He's definitely underrated even after getting 4th place in the Rising Star. 4th in tackles for the Western Bulldogs in his first season, with the likes of Bontempelli, Dunkley and McRae and Hunter. That's a very good effort. And as well as that, he's kicked 11 goals, which is a pretty good effort as a midfielder, especially in the first season. So yeah, Bailey Smith, he's a very shining light for the Bulldogs in what's already a very talented midfield. So there you guys go. That is who I think is the most underrated player for each AFL club. It was a bit tough to choose, so there's probably obviously players that you guys don't agree with. So let me know down in the comments below, and there are probably players that I probably missed out on or didn't really take much of a look at, since I am a bit of a neutral fan. I do follow the Saints, as you guys probably do know. Yeah, if you did enjoy the video, leave a like and comment down below. It took me a bit of time to do some research. Shout out to Druzy for making a similar video where he went on about which players he thought are gonna be having breakout years for 2020. So subscribe to him and check out his video. And also the pair who made a similar video a few weeks ago on the most underrated players. So yeah, check out his video there. But yeah, leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Subscribe if you're new for more AFL content. And I appreciate you guys for watching. And see ya.